Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. On today's podcast, I have Dan Fernbank, who is Energy and Sustainability Director at the University of Reading. And you're also Director of Reading Community Energy, aren't you? So thank you very much for joining me, Dan.
Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And we're in the same town. We should have actually probably done this face to face. I said this to someone else, including my husband, but we could have done this face to face. But it still works fine like this, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So before you worked at and you've been in post at the university for 11 years, haven't you? But before that, you kind of worked at the Carbon Trust, and you're a fellow of the Energy Managers Association. Yeah. And you took a degree in environmental science, environmental studies, isn't it? Yeah. Did the degree bring you to where you are now, or was it something that you were always interested in when you were at school or a lot younger? I know where my husband kind of gets his love of kind of climate science from. Were you similar for environmental studies?
Yeah, I think I've always had an interest in environmental issues. Actually, I started my career in financial services. Spent probably 10 years in financial services. Developed quite a lot of useful skills and transferable skills, but realised after a little while that wasn't really where I wanted to be, and so looked to retrain. And so I started some part-time study with the Open University with a view to sort of getting into environmental work. And within a couple of years, got a break with the Carbon Trust, a 3-month contract with the Carbon Trust, stayed with them for 5 years. And that really gave me the in that I was looking for, and I carried on with what was a part-time degree, sort of simultaneously with working. And the benefit of the Open University is that it gives that flexibility to be able to sort of around a full-time job. And then Reading being my local university, when I saw the job come up here. Great opportunity to come and do something for a big local organisation, and been here ever since.
So, and you've also, your background, you've also taken Prince 2 and you're an MSP practitioner. So I'm assuming the work that you do at the uni needed those kind of skills, didn't they?
Yeah, certainly I think they're really helpful, and I did a lot of project management work when I was in financial services, and that, in terms of those transferable skills, I think that was sort of really good to have had that experience and to be able to sort of bring that forward. And I've kept up with the Prince training because I found it a robust sort of way of managing projects, and I think it certainly helps here. I guess I see my role as a little bit sort of, knowing a little bit about everything and not a lot about anything perhaps.
I'm sure that's not the case.
It's amazing what you pick up actually as you go. But having that sort of structured approach has been really helpful. And increasingly, I suppose, the role is really more about program management than about individual projects. We've got a lot of projects going on at any one time, and there are project managers dedicated to delivering that. That overall program management, I think, is really key. When you're looking at decarbonisation of a whole estate, a big estate, best part of 400 buildings the university has, you really need to have a way of kind of prioritising and managing that workload.
So where do you start? What have you done, and where do you start? So when you started 11 years ago, then, were you the first person to look at decarbonisation then? Was it your job to kind of okay, there you go, your job's yours, get on with it? Is that kind of, and then was it you that was pushing things forwards?
So when I joined, the university had actually just written its first carbon reduction plan.
Okay.
So in the sort of previous year, partly mandated by the government of the time, the university sector, every university was mandated with coming up with a carbon reduction target, and the university set itself a target of reducing its emissions by 35% by 2016. And I suppose I came in at the tail end of that plan being signed off, and so I inherited this plan, if you like, and initially thought, wow, we've got a really good plan here, almost kind of, why do you need me? And started scratching below the surface a little bit and realised that I think what that whole sort of exercise, which was a year's work, did was got the senior buy-in to the idea of the importance of having a robust approach to reducing our carbon emissions. But the detail below that was really kind of very much mine for the developing, if you like. So yeah, quite daunting when I sort of first came in and sort of quickly realised that there isn't really a lot of detail of actually what we're going to do. We kind of knew that lighting needed replacing and buildings needed insulating and all the rest of it, but actually which buildings and which lights and which not really much too. So and I came in halfway through a financial year and was sort of targeted with, you've got a year's money to spend in 6 months and no plans for what to do with it. So that was an interesting start, but I think in the first few months we did quite a lot of draft-proofing work, and that was a good project. Relatively easy to deliver, with some reasonable energy savings, but also improving people's comfort in their buildings. So once we've got that and a couple of sort of early wins under our belt, then I think started to sort of get some confidence and belief and support for what we were doing.
So draft proofing was the first thing. So what did you end up doing? Was it how did you go about that? Was it kind of, you were draft proofing the windows and the doors and everything like that? Was it just kind of refurbishment, or were you having to remove windows and put new ones back in, or what did you do?
Yeah, so it was really kind of tinkering with the existing building fabric, if you like. So it was a draft proofing of existing windows as opposed to replacing windows. And actually, subsequently, most of those windows that we draft proofed have now been double glazed.
Right.
Which isn't to make the draft proofing a bad thing to have done. Certainly, from a comfort point, it wasn't a bad thing to have done at all. And we saw some good energy savings for a few years, but it was a bit of a sticking plaster, really. But actually, it was a good place to start, and then from there then we really sort of started to think about kind of some of the bigger opportunities. It was probably a couple of years before we really took a step back to think, how do you really prioritise an estate this big? And I think initially I was a little bit reluctant to come up with a massive list of things to do. But actually that's exactly what we've ended up doing. And that's been really helpful because, at any point we are managing a list of probably 1,000 potential opportunities that we could deliver. But what we do is we categorise each of those based on how easy we think it will be to implement, how costly it will be to implement, how effective from a sort of carbon saving point of view it will be to implement, and what's the sort of reputational gain or potentially loss, of doing it. And that sort of helps us to really then filter through those 1,000 individual ideas to pick out kind of which are the ones that we want to go forward with. And then what we do is we kind of package it back together to say, well, okay, actually if you're doing LED lighting in one classroom, you're not just going to do it in one classroom, you probably do it in the whole building or in 3 buildings at once or whatever, and then you start to get a sort of an annual package of work that starts to sort of really have some impact.
That's brilliant. I mean, I don't know whether I'd love to see your prioritisation matrix, because I use those for the improvement work that I do. But I can imagine if you've got 1,000 things, you've got lots of items on, and yeah, I can imagine your Gantt chart looks interesting as well over the timeline and stuff like that. My goodness me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the last couple of years have been interesting because there's actually quite a lot of government support for the sort of grant funding available for carbon reduction, energy efficiency at the moment.
Yeah.
It has turned things on its head a little bit because some of the things that we've sort of prioritised in the past haven't necessarily been the most suitable for grant funding, and so we've had to sort of, rethink and I suppose to an extent, focus on where we think we can get sort of the best support. And some of those things, I think actually we really started and for a number of years focused on efficiency first, making our buildings more efficient. I think that's entirely the right thing to do. But I come to realise that it's also quite an idealistic thing to do. And in terms of really making big strides with carbon reduction, the big opportunity, without a doubt, is heat decarbonisation. And I think the UK is waking up to that. Certainly, the university sector is waking up to that, and that's where we need to put a lot of effort in the next few years. And so we have sort of somewhat paused the energy efficiency work to really start looking at heat decarbonisation, because we can do all the insulation or sort of lighting improvements in the world, but actually in all but 5 of our buildings we burn stuff to heat our buildings, and that just is not that is not a modern efficient way of doing things. And so we need to look at alternatives, and that's really where we're focusing our efforts now.
So over the time that you've been there, I'm going to read this because I'm never going to remember it. So you've actually delivered 51% carbon reduction and 43% water reduction savings of £44 million.
Yeah.
That's a big number to shout home about. Tell me a bit. I know you've talked a little bit about this anyway, overall, but those savings are massive. I'm assuming, I would hope that other universities are actually doing the same push.
Yeah, I think, those savings are, they are big. They are...
It's enormous, yeah, fantastic.
They are substantial for the university, that does make a material difference to our bottom line. And of course, you invest 1 year and you see the savings year on year. So that is cumulative savings that we're seeing delivered from work that we've had. And until the sort of the current energy crisis, price crisis of the last kind of 2 years or so, really, our energy bills essentially hadn't gone up in 10 years, despite the fact that electricity and gas had gone up by sort of 30, 40, 50%. Actually, we'd managed to keep our prices, our actual spending level year on year. And if you compare that to sort of a more business as usual of your costs going up in line with energy costs having increased, then yeah, a very significant saving indeed. Unfortunately, the energy price crisis now makes it a difficult environment to be working in, and some scary prices ahead of us.
I can imagine.
But actually, those costs would be a hell of a lot more if we hadn't have delivered, the work of the last few years. It's 51% carbon reduction saving. That includes our business travel. So actually, on our buildings alone, it's 56% reduction.
Okay.
And I think it's fair to say there's no one thing that really. I can't point to one thing to say that's the one that's really delivered the big savings. It is a combination of many, many different things. We've got an energy centre that we built in 2015. Replaced an old steam district heating network, so we have a modern energy centre with a... What's
that then? Go on, sorry.
So that provides heating for 15 of our buildings on campus, and it has a combined heat and power engine, a CHP engine, which burns gas to generate electricity. So it's like a mini power station, really. But unlike a power station, we don't just chuck the heat up the chimney. We use that heat in our buildings. So it's a much more efficient way of, in combination, generating electricity and making use of the heat. and when we opened that was saving us about 1,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year. But actually, 1,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide is only about 3% of our carbon footprint. So, big investment, big project, but individually, it's a little bite. But there's lots and lots of things like that we've done over the years, and on a much smaller scale and sometimes on a bigger scale to sort of really chip away. And undoubtedly, I think you have to recognise that the national grid has massively decarbonised over the last 10, 12 years or so, and so of course we've somewhat benefited from the fact that grid electricity is now a lot cleaner than it used to be. Much less coal, much more renewables. So a much better place to be. That gives us an interesting challenge with our CHP engine now, because where 7, 8 years ago, it was a very good environmental thing to be doing in terms of running a CHP engine to generate your electricity. Actually, it's pretty much on the line now of whether it would be better just to turn it off and just take grid electricity and use gas for our heating. So we are very much looking at, okay, where do we go next to really decarbonise that energy centre?
So I'm just thinking, because obviously, as you know, my husband works in meteorology. Are there options to actually, or have you already put solar panels on any of? Are they all flat roofed? They won't all be flat roofs, will they?
No, it's mostly pitch roofed. But solar panels went on pitch roofs or flat roofs.
Yeah, of course.
That was kind of ideal because you're always going to be able to find south. Whereas if it's pitch, you need to be facing somewhat south. We've got. Actually, don't know how many systems, but I can tell you exactly how many panels we've got. We've got 3,000.
Go on, tell me.
3,600 individual panels. So we've got it's about 1.2 megawatts of solar panels. State. And on our main campus, our White Knights campus, that generates about 5 or 6% of our total electricity demand for the year. So, actually, if you look at sort of aerial images now, if they're up to date at least, a lot of our buildings now have got solar panels on them, and that's in part thanks to a grant that we had a couple of years ago from Salix Finance that really helped us expand. We increased solar generation sort of fourfold in the space of a year. And that means, we have got a big generation capacity. But overall, over a year, it's still a relatively small part of our output.
But like you said, it's all these incremental changes that are kind of put in, come together to make those percentages that we were talking about earlier. And actually, I think some people think you've got to do massive things all the time. Or, you've got to do a big step change and you move from one place to the other and that's your aim. But I think if you can do what you've been doing with regards to the incremental changes, it makes a massive difference, and you can kind of demonstrate those figures, can't you? You're obviously saying, you can show that you've demonstrated, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think I think that's exactly right. Lots and lots of things that can be done. From the small to the very big, and in a place like a university campus, a lot of the good ideas sit out with the people in the buildings that that live in the buildings and that put up with the nuances of the buildings, should we say? But also a lot of the opportunities are around. The scientific facilities that we have and the scientific equipment that we use. So we did quite a few projects with the Salix grant funding that we had. A couple of years ago, we had a £3.2 million grant, and we did a lot of work replacing old, inefficient kit in our science buildings. So things like drying cabinets that are used to dry glassware in laboratory. These were kind of heated metal boxes sitting in a lab drying glassware that pretty much sort of sat on all day drying glassware. No insulation, very little control, and actually kicking out heat into the lab, making it hot, which at times meant that you had to cool it down. And we've seen very good measured savings of around 70%. through replacing those.
Wow.
So yeah, and that's just a bit of plug-in equipment really. There's nothing difficult or technical about doing it. It's just having the money and also seeing the opportunity. I mean, the payback there is about 4 years, probably a lot less than that. Now energy prices are so high. It's probably 2 years.
I think some of the stuff that you're doing, it's not some, all of it is absolutely brilliant. It just, it is. It's just what I would ask you. So, okay, what are the next steps towards, net zero? What are your aims and intentions, kind of moving forward?
Yeah, so as I said, the big focus really at the moment is heat decarbonisation,
yes,
and that will be our focus. Really for the next 5 years or more. I mean, we've set a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2030, and that is very substantially going to be about decarbonising our heat. So we have got a couple of big grant applications that we're just waiting for decisions on at the moment, but we I've just got permission from the Environment Agency to do a test drill down into the aquifer that sits below our campus. So there is a water supply below our campus, and what we're looking at doing is extracting water out of the ground, taking a little bit of heat out of that water. So the water will be a fairly constant 12, 13 degrees. We'll take a few degrees of heat out of that water. We'll put the water back into the ground, so we're not consuming any water. There's no environmental damage. Put the water back into the ground, and then we use that heat in a heat pump, so we compress that up to a level that can heat our buildings, and so that will be the first step in decarbonising our energy centre, and we think, and this obviously is subject to this test that we need to do, but we think that could supply 70% of the heating for those 15 buildings.
Wow! So that you are the first person. So that's a water source heat pump, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're the first person I've spoken to so far that is talking about water source heat pumps, because nobody really has that option unless they live next to a stream, and they've got a few acres of land. That's brilliant, and also not too far away from. Obviously, I know because I live in Reading, not too far away from White Knights. There's a lake, isn't there, as well? So I'm assuming you're getting lots of water source coming in through kind of round there. Yeah,
I mean we have actually toyed with the possibility of could we use the lake for a water source heat pump.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our lake is too shallow. I think we would freeze the lake.
Right.
So that isn't really an option. We also have a campus over the other side of Greenlands on the Marlow Road. The Henley Business School, and that's next to the Thames. And we have looked quite seriously at the potential to have a water source heat pump there using water from the Thames, which technically looks viable. It looks quite promising actually, and that is our sort of preferred solution for how we would decarbonise the heating at the business school. But at the moment, the energy centre is the bigger opportunity. So we're focusing there. So hopefully in the next couple of months we'll do those test drills. Assuming that all goes okay, then over the next 18 months we'll be looking at introducing this heat pump, and that will be a really big, that carbon-wise, that will be by far the biggest step we've ever taken on our decarbonisation journey.
Do you know of any other universities who are looking into this kind of stuff? Are you talking to any other unis that are kind of looking into the similar things?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's on a lot of universities' mind. I think heat decarbonisation, I think, generally is recognised in the sector now as a big challenge. Oxford Brookes actually have recently retrofitted a ground source heat pump to one of their buildings. And that's quite an innovative solution because it has diagonal boreholes rather than vertical, which is an interesting way of approaching things because you can deliver this in a much smaller space. So they've got quite a challenging. They were looking at quite a challenging location, and the advantage of doing this is that rather than having a big for ground source heat pumps, you tend to need a fairly big bit of land to spread your boreholes around. But doing it diagonally means that on the surface you can use quite a small piece of land, because under the ground you're spreading out. For us, for this, because we're looking at an open loop borehole system, actually taking water out of the ground rather than running a refrigerant around the ground. We don't need as many boreholes. We only need probably 2 pairs of boreholes. We expect that to be sufficient. But yeah, there's lots of technical considerations there. You need to make sure that you don't put your boreholes too close together, so that you're not getting cold water coming back in. But a lot of work.
I'm going to have to come and visit you. I'm going to have to come and visit you when you get a go ahead for this, because this sounds fabulous.
Absolutely.
So you've got to tell me about these awards as well, because you've won a number of, multiple awards. Give us a little bit of info on those, will you?
Sure. Yeah. God, I have to cast my mind back. I think the last award that we won was a couple of years ago. Our net zero carbon plan was awarded Net Zero Carbon Strategy of the Year by the Energy Managers Association. Which was nice, if you like, giving us the recognition that at least we've got a good plan in place. Obviously, the proof is in the delivery. But prior to that, some of our individual projects have won awards. So we did a big project looking at our fume cupboards in our science labs that keep researchers safe when they're working with sort of hazardous materials. Very energy hungry, because of course you need to draw materials away from people as quickly as possible. So they use a lot of ventilation. But using a lot of ventilation means that you suck a lot of heat out of buildings as well. And so we did a big project right across our 200 and something fume cupboards across the estate to make them more efficient, so that they're only really drawing the amount of air out that they needed to, and that delivered about £250,000 in financial savings, annual financial savings. So that won a couple of awards. I think our most recent achievement, and probably the one I'm most proud of, is every year a group called the People on Planet produced a sort of a green league of universities. The university set itself a strategic goal to reach the top 5 by 2026, and last year in November we came 4th. So
cool.
And that puts us sort of the highest amongst all research intensive universities in the country. So that's great. And of course the challenge now is to make sure that we maintain that position.
Of course, yeah. You've got to be proud of all this, I bet.
It's nice to get that external recognition. It really does. It helps give kind of reassurance that actually it's all worthwhile. Of course it's all worthwhile, because we're making a big difference here. I mean, it's worth saying that cumulatively we've saved £44 million of money, but the more important number is that cumulatively we've saved about 160,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere in the last 11 years, and that is the equivalent of taking all of the road traffic off of Reading Borough about 15 months. So that is a very substantial number, and it matters. Some of the recent IPCC reports really talk about the importance of every tonne of carbon that you don't emit. The single most important thing we can be doing is putting less carbon into the atmosphere. It's not a linear, there's going to be climate change damage or there's not. It will be worse the more that we emit. So everything we can stop doing is helping that environmental damage. So that's the thing that really matters.
Yeah, definitely. 15 months.
Yeah.
And we know what the road traffic in Reading's like. I was talking to somebody recently about it, and it's just, it gets worse. And because I live in Caversham, which is north of the Thames, the bottlenecks are always Reading and Caversham bridges. just a nightmare. But we won't go there for the people who are listening or watching, because that'll just bore them. I could talk to you for ages about that when having a good old bitch about it, but there you go. So, finally, I wanted to talk to you about you're a director of Reading Community Energy.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I was doing a little bit of research on you, I kind of said to my husband, I went, do you know about this? And I said, you need to know about it if you don't know about it already, because it's a local cooperative, isn't it? But it's part of a larger cooperative. Is that right?
Yeah. So Reading Community Energy Society is a community benefit society, which means that we exist for the benefit of the community. Legally, we have to deliver benefit back to the community, and we do that by supporting the uptake of renewables in the Reading area, particularly working with sort of businesses, charities, churches, schools, and the like. And it's all voluntary run. And we've been operating for about 7 or 8 years now. And we're supported by an organisation called Energy for All, who work nationally with 33 cooperatives around the country. So this started with wind turbines a number of years ago, and they now support societies that do solar panels and hydro. So, well supported, and good to have that kind of network that Energy for All has, but we are very locally focused. And we operate by local share offers. So we invite people to invest in schemes from sort of £200 upwards. And then we raise money to pay for the installation. So there's no cost to the building users for having solar panels installed. And then what we do is we sell the generated electricity back to the building users. So we get an income, which ultimately pays for the installation of the panels. It pays a fair return back to the people that have invested in the scheme. And then any spare money that we have is ring-fenced, and that goes into a sustainability fund that local organisations can put applications in for small grants for anything from we've done sort of mini solar panel installations or little kitchen gardens at local schools, any number of sustainability initiatives.
That's brilliant. So, go on, are you going to tell? Do you know how many solar panels you've got in Reading then?
So we've got 22 systems.
Yeah.
And it's about 550 kilowatts of solar at the moment. So a fair amount. Quite a few of them are sort of too high or on too flat roofs to actually see. But the Central Library in Reading has our solar panel. And that has a 50 kilowatt solar panel system. That's been installed and running happily for a good number of years. The RISC, the International Solidarity Centre on London Street, for those listeners that know what I'm talking about, has our solar panels. And a whole other range of buildings in between, and we're always, very open to conversations about more installs. There's lots and lots of roofs that are very suitable for solar. As I say, I mean, it is really business focused rather than individual sort of home
consumer.
But always looking for more, and I think much more that could be done.
And Energy for All, so do you know what, is that UK wide then?
Yes, it is, yeah. So they're actually based in Cumbria, and they started in Cumbria.
Right.
Wind turbines in Cumbria. They're all around the country.
Okay, so if I just say to you websites and contact details, then what would you, because I personally think that there will be a lot of people that, hopefully a lot of people who are listening to this who would be either interested in what you've been doing at the university, or definitely, with regards to kind of the Reading Community Energy and Energy for All, how do people find you for a start off? How do they, what's the best place for Energy for All? And if they're interested in any of this, what do they do to get hold of you then?
Sure. Okay. So university-wise, website is reading.ac.uk/sustainability, or you can email us at sustainability@reading.ac.uk. And then Reading Community Energy-wise, the web address is readingenergy.coop. The email is info@readingenergy.coop. I'm not sure I can remember the website for Energy for All.
Don't worry, everybody can have a look, can't they?
Yeah, but it's Energy 4 and then all.
Yeah, but it'd be good. It's a good opportunity for people to actually, have a look at what's happening, what is available, and maybe start kind of getting involved a little bit.
Yeah, I know an amazing number of local energy cooperatives around the country, actually. If you go looking, I was talking to my sister about this the other day, you go looking, you will find a local energy cooperative near to you.
See, I didn't actually realise, so it's brilliant that, that you're involved in all of this. How do you have the time? That's my question. How do you fit it all in? People say that to me about my stuff, but
yeah,
do you manage to fit it in on the weekends?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer to that. Yeah, it's just a juggling act.
And actually, so I was going to ask you, so you are on LinkedIn as well,
yeah.
Aren't you? Are you kind of active? I'm not sure whether you're at that, obviously I know you through kind of my husband and Reading Uni. Do you kind of post on LinkedIn very often?
From time to time, but sporadically, it's probably fair to say. But yeah, I mean, certainly I do. When there's something to celebrate, particularly, it tends to go on LinkedIn.
Of course. Well, something to celebrate, like delivering savings of £44 million.
Absolutely.
I think that's probably a good thing to go on about. So, well, listen, I really look forward to, and please invite me over to have a look. I really want to see water source heat pumps in action. I've always been a bit of a geek about these kind of things anyway, and I just think it's absolutely fantastic. I'd love to be able to talk from first-hand experience of being able to see it.
Sure.
But just really lovely talking to you. It's been very, very interesting, and just keep doing it. Keep doing what you're doing. You're obviously doing the right thing. It's fabulous. So just to say thank you ever so much for your time, Dan. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz. Good to talk.
And to you. And I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else. So I shall see you all next time. Thanks for listening and watching. Bye. You've been watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon, and you'll receive all of our weekly videos. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.